Thank you all for joining us this morning. We greatly appreciate you being a part of this discussion today. This is the 2020-21 media briefing regarding the South Carolina report cards and state assessment results with the South Carolina Department of Education. Please do keep in mind that this information is embargoed until 12:01 tonight, September 1st. This information will be available to all the public, but we just wanted to give media a chance to have access to this information prior so that you can get all your stories together. And we're here to help answer any questions that you may have. Real quick, just some housekeeping items. If you could please keep yourselves on mute. If you do have questions, please submit those in the chat box. And at this time, I will introduce some of our staff that are on the call that will be addressing questions today. First, we have State Superintendent of Education, Molly Spearman. We also have joining us today, David Mathis from the Division of College and Career Readiness, Betsy Carpenter from the Division of Data Technology and Agency Operations, also Dan Rauya with the research and data analysis here at the Department of Education, and also Stephanie DeStasio, who is also with the College and Career Readiness Division. At this time, I will turn it over to Superintendent Spearman.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Derek. And I believe Sylvia is on. You may have said her name, and I didn't hear that. I wasn't paying enough attention, Derek. But good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is always a very important time of the year when we announce the results of the summative assessments and end of course tests, high school graduation rates that were done during this past year. You all realize what a unique situation this is. We have never been through a pandemic before, at least since we've been keeping records like this. So we anticipated that the results would be different, that our students would not be able to show the growth that we had hoped. In fact, if you remember, I had even asked for a waiver from the U.S. Department of Education that the summative assessments would not be done because it's very difficult to validate the information with all the many variables that were so different for our students as they dealt with COVID in their communities, with schools, some being able to open before others. And so we knew that this assessment data would need to be looked at very, very carefully and keeping in mind the context of how this assessment was done. So I was not shocked at the results. However, I am very, very concerned with the results. As you can see, if you look deeply, that our students, particularly our younger students who this was their first time at taking a summative assessments, our third graders, that they showed, they did not show as much growth as we had hoped and had been shown in previous years. As the elementary grades went up, things leveled off. And by sixth grade and ELA, you see that actually the students there showed some growth over the previous assessments, which was very, very encouraging. So I would ask you to remember that as you report. I think the question here is not so focused on these results, but what are we going to do about them? And I hope that we'll have a chance to discuss that. We have been very, very carefully working with our districts, working in-house at the Department of Education to streamline our standards, to prioritize the things that really need to be taught in each grade level, to accelerate. And I hope that you'll use that word, accelerate the learning of our students. It's not so much learning loss because they never got, so many of them never got the instruction to lose it. It's more about us being very focused, prioritizing the priority standards that need to be taught at these grades as these students are moving through their grade levels. So we can answer those questions for you. We are We are making sure that our ESSER funding is focused in on giving the additional support and the resources that our teachers need, that our students and families need. So we're very, very excited about that. But I will tell you, and you heard me say a few weeks ago, my level of concern is extremely high because of the situation we find ourselves in now with COVID impacting the ability for students to be in school face to face. And we know that's what they need. So it's an extraordinary time for educators. It's an extraordinary time for our families. My message would be to families and to our school folks to please work together. We need to be focused on the acceleration of our learning and doing whatever it is we can do to make sure our students can be in school safely. And that has been very difficult over the last few weeks. But that is our focus on helping our students, our teachers accelerate the learning so that as quickly as possible, and I don't think it's going to happen in 1 year, it's going to take more than 1 year to recover from these new circumstances. And we'll be working very, very focused to make sure that our children and our students have the resources and our teachers have the resources that they need to be successful. So we'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Superintendent Spearman. We'll get right into the questions, some that were submitted prior to the start of today's briefing. The first is, how is the state using these report cards and assessments going forward to help improve education in districts across the state?
Well, always we look at these results to see where the gaps are. It helps us focus in on the particular grade levels, the particular districts and schools where additional resources need to be. And our staff has already been working through professional development offerings, through our Palmetto Literacy Program, which is those are the schools that have 30% of their students who are not at grade level or more, 30% or more of their students who are not at grade level in language arts. We have already been auditing their curriculum, giving them advice on ways that they can meet the needs of their students with stronger curriculums. We are assisting them in purchasing those. We are assisting them with professional development for their teachers. So this information really is for us to offer our support and doing it in a very supportive manner, not in a punitive manner. And I think that's very, very important for us. And I'm going to turn to Dr. Mathis, who is in charge of working with all of these folks. So David, do you have anything that add that I may have left out?
Sure. I think one of our priorities has been the students who are in the underserved areas, because I think they were probably affected the most. So making sure that those students, as Superintendent Spearman said, making sure in literacy, especially, that we assist with the right curriculum that they have in place, the right training with that curriculum. So that has been a focus on what we call the Palmetto Literacy Project schools. And that's, as Superintendent Spearman said, 30% or more of their students that are below grade level. Additionally, we know that math we anticipated that it would take a hit with the COVID impact, and we would see a decline in those scores. So we have provided an intervention model for all of our districts. They have available to them, in addition to their regular or their core math curriculum, they have an intervention model that students can use 15 to 20 minutes a day, specific to the needs that they have, where their skill set may not be as developed as it needs to be at that grade level. So there's been a priority there in literacy and in math. And I think another thing that we were able to provide for districts, and we have seen evidence that that is being significantly used in our districts, is we provided a roadmap for success, a model for school improvement that we asked them to include in their academic recovery plans and address the students at each, what we call tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Tier 1 are those students who may need a slight amount of remediation. They're close to being on grade level. Those who need moderate remediation, but then those who need in tier 3 significant remediation. So helping districts plan for each of those groups of students and personalizing those needs. But I will say one of the greatest resources we have for our students is the Learning Object Repository. We saw that during the pandemic, especially in our most underserved areas, there was a huge resource gap. So we are now providing a learning object repositories like a mega digital library resource where teachers can go in and get the most robust resources to teach our academic standards, which we know are pretty robust themselves. So every teacher in the state will have access to more resources than they have had in the past.
David, I think that's significant for our colleagues, our friends in the media to understand. We have been able to purchase resources, the learning management system, which will support all teachers with better and stronger, higher quality materials that they can share, our learning repository. All of those are things that we had wanted to purchase for years and not had the funding. And the federal ESSER funding did allow us to do that. So we're very, very excited about our state taking a giant leap forward in the ability to connect teachers and for them to offer high quality lesson plans and resources, and for us to make sure that it's in that repository for them. So we're really pleased about that. Is there anything we've left out that another staff member wants to join in on? Okay, let's go to the next question.
All right, thank you both. This one in the chat from Adam Mintzer of WIS. Previously, Superintendent Spearman mentioned students were 2 to 3 months behind where they would be in a typical year. Has this report card increased that range?
Adam, that's a great question. And good morning to you. I have used that as an average. And if you look at the scores, I will tell you that our third graders, and staff help me out with this because I'm not looking at the actual numbers. I'm doing this from memory. But the most significant drop is in third grade. And it is more than 2 to 3 months. The problem is that the points that you see on the report card do not actually translate exactly into months. We just said that in a way to help people sort of comprehend what we're talking about. The third grade drop was 11 points, I believe, right, David? I'm not looking at that exactly. So, and again, we have students who have been a year behind before they even started school. So it's difficult to say, but there are some students, yes, who had much more significant drop than others. But on the average, we're saying that 2 to 3 months. Dan and David, help me out there to make sure I've answered that correctly.
And Superintendent Spearman, I think the key thing there is with the third grade, their first experience of taking a summative test, but they were greatly impacted by the pandemic. And there were different modes of instruction, whether some were face-to-face, some were hybrid, some were virtual all year. So they were significantly impacted in those early years by that, by those modalities of instruction. And I think we saw that evidenced in those results.
Yes, and I think, again, I want to point out to make sure you all, and I hope you'll convey this to your readers and viewers, there's such a range of how COVID impacted students last year. As you know, we have students who did not miss a single day of face-to-face instruction. Now, they may have been behind the state average, but before school started, but they were in class with a teacher every day. So it was a pretty normal year for them. And then we had other students who did not report to class all year. They were either virtual or working on pencil paper packets. They may have had COVID hit in their family. They may have been sick themselves. Mom and dad may have lost their jobs, to others whose parents were able to work and have a fairly normal year. So please convey it's really, really difficult to take the context of these students' lives away from this assessment data. And I think we have to convey that to our readers that, yes, we gave a standardized test at the end of the year, and it has given us some data. But we have to look very closely at it and be willing to realize there's additional support that have to be given to particular areas of the state. And I see, go ahead, Derek.
Thank you. With this question's from Franny Clairvaux from Watchbox,
Yeah.
asking just about how bad the data is and what's the score the state should have received, and how does that relate to what it actually is?
Well, good morning, Freddie. How bad is it? I would say definitely our focus is on our earliest learners and getting them the support that they need. What kind of score should we get? I want to see all kids on grade level. I really want to see everybody exceeding that. And I think it's important for you all to understand too, what does it mean to meet expectations? That means you're triggered and in line to be very successful, making a B when you get to college. That's how this is lined up. So that's how I want everybody to be. We're not there. We are not there. And we haven't been there for all students, even without the pandemic. So we've got a lot to do. Anybody else want to add to that? Okay, we'll go on to the next question.
All right, thank you. This one is from Amy Russo, asking if you could break down as a whole what we are seeing among elementary, middle, and high school.
Well, as a whole, and I'll take a shot at this, but obviously from the results, you'll see the younger the student, and we begin our assessments at 3rd grade for the state assessment. Those children had the most significant drop in where we normally were. And as it goes up, the gap decreases. In middle school, David, you're looking at those numbers, and I'm not, so I'm doing it from memory, but in middle school, not as much. In fact, there was some gain, even 6th grade, I believe, 6th grade elementary, ELA. And then in high school, I think we need to spend some time talking about that. High school's interesting, the end of course assessments that are given in English 1 and you'll note on the English 1, normally in past years, we've been assessing English 1. We moved this year. I had already planned to do that, to give the assessment after English 2. So that's hard to attract, to compare there because of that difference. But there was a drop in scores in high school. Our high school students who had normally performed very well continued to perform very well. Our C students tended to drop. Graduation rate is up a bit. And I figured there's probably a question about that somewhere. I'll go ahead and answer that. But we believe that is because we put our top priority at making sure our high school seniors graduated from the beginning. We said to our counselors, do everything you can to make sure that our students are graduated, those who were in line to graduate. We put it as a top priority in our own virtual school. We opened up additional slots if a student needed to take a course in order to graduate. Most of those seniors would have already done all of their end of course assessments because they take biology early on. They had already tested in English 1. So they had that behind them. And we think that that real focus on getting students graduated is a bright point, that we can claim a little victory here, that we did do a better job this year getting our high school students graduated. And it was because of that focus that we really put on that. What did I miss out, staff? Is there anything else I should have mentioned? Okay, we'll go on to the next question.
Thank you, ma'am. This was going back to a question that we received prior to the briefing that I wanted to catch up on. While it's necessary to take these assessment results with a grain of salt, were there any schools or districts with larger than normal gains or drops compared to what might be expected? And if so, who might those be and what might account for that?
Well, and I want to say it's not a grain of salt. It's I think it will help us identify areas where we really have got to put tremendous focus. So I don't want to just, I'm not brushing them off totally. I'm just reminding everyone that you've really got to look at the context of where these students are. Dan, can you help me on anything else?
I can. So a couple of things. One, that a lot of students came in that were in virtual instruction and came in to test, but we're actually commissioning Education Analytics to do an opt-out analysis and find out what happened to different subgroups as maybe they showed up to test or didn't show up to test. So any comparisons that we do at subgroup level has to be in the context of looking at who didn't test for that group. Our schools did a great job of trying to get people in to test, even if they had been in virtual instruction. So our participation rates are better than we expected. But with that change in modality, I think we're going to have to really study and see before we make any solid claims about the impact on a particular subgroup to see how who wasn't there impacted the overall scores.
Thank you, Dan. And so we will be analyzing this data, doing studies, as you heard him say, to compare virtual versus face-to-face. Anecdotally, teachers, principals have told us, you know, we had to get our kids back, and we can make some kind of overall statements about the impact of virtual versus in-person learning. But you will see, we are in the process and also working with the Education Oversight Committee to do some real analysis to be able to give you better information there.
Okay, this one's from Alex, and you might have touched on this a little bit. The subjects that students are most behind in, and has the COVID-19 situation made it hard to recruit the right teachers to help students catch up in these subjects?
Well, math is a little more, showed a drop more than literacy. Math is a core subject area with a lot of, we call it scaffolding. You got to learn this concept before you can learn this concept. So that was not a shocker to us, but definitely math has been most affected. And the second part of that question was?
The COVID-19 situation has that.
Yeah, absolutely. As in any job, I think it's really taking the strong at heart to want to come into teaching, and for various reasons, not just the dedication and resilience it takes to be an educator these days, but also the health issues. So yes, COVID has affected our ability to recruit and retain teachers. We are trying to counter that with encouraging districts to offer more financial incentives through their ESSER funding for teachers who do extra work, who may teach virtually and also in their classroom, giving bonuses. So, and I will continue to ask for our teacher salary line to be increased as we are preparing our budget now. We've got to offer a stronger financial support for our teachers in South Carolina, as well as those other supports that they need, whether it's mental health, offering them the supplies that they need in their classroom, the psychological and mental health support that they need to be successful. And I don't know if Stephanie would like to speak on that. Stephanie D'Estasio has been working at this diligently. Stephanie, what have I left out? Or would you like to spotlight?
No, I think you did a fantastic job. I would just say one of the things that we are definitely seeing from our districts as they're thinking about what their next steps are is a real focus on that professional learning for teachers, making sure teachers have the support that they need as they're moving forward. Because what we know is, as Dr. Mathis mentioned earlier in our roadmap, in addition to focusing on the curriculum, as we think about the instructional practices and making sure that those are where they need to be, that's where we've got to make sure that we continue to provide that support to our teachers. And so districts are really focusing on finding unique ways to do that, creative ways to do that, but also networking with one another so that they can learn from one another, as opposed to each district having to figure it out on their own.
Superintendent Spearman, one question that we received yesterday prior to the briefing was if you could elaborate just on the warning to not compare this data to previous years, and just how drastically testing was affected and what effect did it have on these results?
Well, we were very fortunate in South Carolina that we have established a great trust between the districts and the Department of Education, that they shared and we worked to support them with their interim assessment data. That came in 3 times during the year. We had a brand new ability, it's called our Rally tool, to analyze that data and send that data back to the districts and help them. Dr. Mathis described that a little bit, but we were able to really support the classroom teacher to give them good data to let them know where their students were, and that informed them for instruction. A summative assessment at the end of the year, and any standardized assessment, has to be so controlled. I mean, we make sure that it's given at the exact same time, that students have, that it's done the exact same way, that the instructions are read the same way, that students are there the correct number of days in order to be able to be assessed, and that so many things, so many variables are the same, that they are under control. COVID threw a lot of that out the window. And therefore, the results, you have to take that into consideration as you look at these results. Now, I'm not a statistician, not an expert in this, but just good old common sense tells you that this was not a good testing situation. Now, we were very pleased, and you all can see that information by district. You know, a parent, if it felt that their student shouldn't take the test, they could opt out of the test this year. But we did have higher, and I see someone ask me, what am I surprised at? One of the things I'm surprised at is the high percentage of our students who did show up to take the assessment. Overall districts, it was very high. 95% of the students is what we aim for. And many of our districts met that and went beyond. We had 3 that had very low percentage. And you can look at that. Derek, I don't want to say those because I may be incorrect, but generally speaking, our percentage of students taking the assessment was stronger than I thought, which was a good thing, a very good thing. But overall, just knowing how important it is to have as few variables as possible in a standardized assessment setting, and knowing what our students had gone through individually, I think is why I want to be so sure that our citizens understand that. Dan, what did I leave out?
I think you did very well, Superintendent Spearman. So there's, I'm probably not going to say this well, but if somebody gives me a new tool, right, I don't start out being an expert at that tool. So as we introduce these tools for digital learning, I think that there is a learning curve that has to happen in schools that allow us to deliver that instruction effectively. I think that every time that a student goes through a transition in and out of school, there's a certain amount of change that causes people to react to the new situations that they're in. So we're trying to provide a stable environment across the school. We're trying to encourage face-to-face instruction, and we're trying to build our facility with these digital tools to improve our responsiveness across the department. Learning a new tool while you're out of the building is a difficult task because you don't have the support network that makes that happen. So I think that our overall response is improving, and our ability to recover even in uncertain times is going to improve over time. We're trying for a stable environment and working to drive that forward in a safe way.
Thank you, Dan, for reminding. I should have mentioned that, and I appreciate you bringing it up. Just, we're getting better at virtual instruction overall. I mean, I think that it was such a quick change for everyone, and we've all learned how our teachers have learned skills. Our students are better. So at learning, the responsibility of being a virtual learner. But it's taken a long time for that to happen. So thank you for reminding me about that virtual piece being another variable in the assessment results. I see someone ask, is it all bad? Were you going to get to that question, Derek? Is that the next one, or?
I was going to ask about the one that seems to be common from several media members is just the question of the move that we're seeing currently for some districts and schools going to temporary virtual instruction, and just the possible consequences that test results could see from those. I don't know if you could speak to that.
I will. I'm extremely concerned. And I realize, you all remind me the Supreme Court is meeting as we speak. This is not what we wanted. We wanted and needed a normal school year. We need children back in school with their teachers. We need people to get vaccinated, and we need people to wear their mask, particularly when they're indoors. It just saddens me, and I'm almost to the point of anger that it's not happening like it should. So I'm extremely concerned that we are putting ourselves in a situation where schools are having to close and go virtual. That's not what any of us wanted. It's not what the local school folks wanted. We had prepared for a normal year, and the resistance to get vaccinated, to follow all of the safety protocols, is not helping the situation. So my plea to everyone, whether you're a parent, a 16-year-old and up who's eligible, or a 12-year-old who needs your parents' permission, please consider getting vaccinated. And I believe that you can probably start looking at the map at the places where we're having to go virtual again. Those are the lesser vaccinated communities. Those are the areas of the state where there's a lot of resistance to wearing masks indoors. So if you really want our South Carolina children to receive the instruction that they so desperately need, everyone needs to bite their pride, cooperate, and follow these very simple procedures that would help us be able to help our students.
Thank you, Superintendent Spearman. And I think that covers most of the questions that we got in. Feel free to submit any additional questions that you may have to communications@ed.sc.gov. I've listed that in the chat box, and I know many of you have asked, will there be a recording of today's briefing? Yes, there will be. It will be posted to the agency's YouTube channel a little bit later today. Appreciate your patience as we get that worked and uploaded. And one more question that just came through. Yes, this is this media information shared today in the press conference. Also, all is embargoed until 12:01 Wednesday, September 1st. So just wanted to give you all again a chance to ask your questions, to prepare your stories ahead of tomorrow's release. So
Derek,
yes, ma'am.
if I started to answer that one question, and I do want to say that there are some students who did very well, and there are students who showed growth. If someone asked the question, did everybody drop? No. And you can look at that, and obviously, in order for the average to be there, there are students who did very well and who succeeded, and we're very, very proud of that and the work that they did with their teachers. So not everyone had a drop in their scores. It averages out, but we had school districts who held their own and perhaps even a little growth there. So thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, and you did a nice closing, but I wanted to make sure I answered that.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate it.